Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, November 2nd, 2017. The time is 7 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Giza.
Here.
Trustee Lumsden.
Here.
Trustee Ballerine.
Here.
Trustee Sedeby.
Here.
Trustee Peters.
Here.
Village Manager Francis.
Here.
Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Community Development Director App.
Here. Police
Chief Weitzel.
Here.
Also present, Village Clerk Haley. Not with us this evening is Trustee Pollock.
Thank you very much. If you'd please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and good evening. We are obviously in a little bit of a different setting tonight. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? Yes, a little bit louder. Can we get a little bit more volume on this? I'm a soft speaker, I'm told. So we're up here because of the acoustics. We have to be behind these speakers. So that's why we're up on stage tonight, so that everybody can hear and see what we have to say. First up this evening are presentations and public comment, and I have the honor tonight to be presenting two proclamations. The first honoring Dorothy Sikora on her retirement from the Riverside Public Library, and the second honoring the Riverside Junior Women's Charity on the occasion of their 80th anniversary. So I would ask Ms. Sikora to join me at the podium. Whereas Dorothy Sikora has provided dedicated and excellent service to the Riverside Public Library from June 1990 to April 1999 and June 2002 to November 2017, first as an administrative assistant and then as programming director, and especially in her most recent role as public relations coordinator. And whereas Dorothy Sikora served the Village of Riverside in the capacity of village clerk from April 1995 to April 1997, and whereas Dorothy Sikora has been a driving force behind quality programming and community outreach during her tenure at the Riverside Public Library. And whereas Dorothy Sikora has served the Library Board of Trustees by taking minutes and preparing board reports. And whereas Dorothy Sikora has volunteered countless hours, to which I can attest, in service to community organizations such as the Riverside Arts Weekend, Frederick Law Olmsted Society, the Riverside Chamber of Commerce, the Riverside Farmers Market, and the Riverside Township Lions Club. And whereas Dorothy Sikora has demonstrated great compassion, dedication, and commitment to Riverside residents, library and village employees, and intergovernmental partners. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Benjamin Sells, on behalf of the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees and the entire village staff, do hereby express to Dorothy Sikora our sincere and deep appreciation for her outstanding service and extraordinary efforts on behalf of the Riverside Public Library and the residents of the Village of Riverside, and proclaim Saturday, November 4th, 2017 as Dorothy Sikora Day in the Village of Riverside.
Thank you. I'm humbled and I'm honored, and it's just been, a lovely run with working with all these wonderful people. Anybody I've ever come up to and asked to do a program never turned me down, and we shared so much together, and I made so many wonderful, wonderful friends. Thank you.
And I would ask representatives from the Riverside Junior Women's Charity to step forward and to make sure my Riverside Junior Women's Charity pin is straight. Susan, Allison. Some of you might not know this extraordinary history of this organization, so this is really fun. Whereas on February 8th, 1937, Lorraine Bender, and 35 other young women from Riverside, the majority of whom were graduates of the Riverside Brookfield class of 1935, met at Ms. Bender's home. There had been a Riverside Women's Club since 1913, and Ms. Bender and her friends obtained the blessings from that group for a new organization. 4 of these senior women acted as sponsors, and Riverside Junior Women's Charity was founded. And whereas throughout the ensuing decades, the Riverside Junior Women's Charity has provided unsurpassed service, not only to the village of Riverside, but to our nation in times of both war and peace. And whereas 80 years after its founding, the Riverside Junior Women's Charity remains a vital part of the Riverside community, and in 2001 successfully modified its status to become a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And whereas a legally recognized nonprofit organization, the Riverside Junior Women's Charity continues to help individuals and organizations in Riverside and surrounding areas by identifying needs and providing charitable giving and support to address those needs. And whereas with its unwavering focus on friendship and community, the Riverside Junior Women's Charity has provided a vehicle for public service to hundreds of women over its long history. The organization currently has 46 active members, 25 associate members, and 33 honorary members. And whereas through its effort and support of community events, charitable giving, and countless volunteer hours, the Riverside Junior Women's Charity has established itself as one of the preeminent philanthropic organizations in Riverside's history. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the members of the Riverside Board of Trustees, do hereby congratulate the Riverside Junior Women's Charity on its 80th anniversary and express our sincere and deep appreciation for its outstanding service and dedication to the village of Riverside and its residents.
Hi, my name is Allison Scanlon, representing juniors, and I'm here with Susan Ziglicki, who is our current juniors president. And I'd like to thank President Sells and the village board, as well as village staff, for this honor. We so appreciate it. Juniors has been going strong for 80 years, and we couldn't have done that without thousands of hours donated by our members, continual support from our community coming out for our events, supporting us in every way that they can, support from our business community and individuals who donate their goods and services to help our fundraisers, and all of our philanthropy recipients. We would not be successful without you, so thank you to those who are here tonight as well as those who are watching from home. We so appreciate you helping us get to 80, and we hope we can accomplish another 80. Thank you.
Next up is public comment. Now, with regard to the video gambling discussion, that is on the agenda for a little bit later. So if you're here for that, I would ask that you wait until we get to that agenda item to make your comments. But are there any other comments that somebody would like to make? Mr. Gallegos and then Ms. Scanlon.
Good evening, Mr. President, trustees, those in attendance, and to those watching at home. Sorry I come before you and the village board on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. It is my privilege to inform the public of upcoming chamber events. Next month, we will be hosting our annual holiday stroll. It'll be Friday, December 1st, beginning at 5:45 p.m. Santa will arrive. We will have the RB Magical Singers here. We will have, of course, a horse and carriage ride, face painting, and other activities. This year, we are asking for volunteers to help with these things. So for those who are interested, you should contact Brian Brennan at 708-334-0104. And once things are finalized, I'll be before you again to let you know who's having what that evening. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
Hello again, I'm Allison Scanlon, 167 North Gate Road in Riverside. And again, I'm here representing the Riverside Junior Women's Charity. Like Alex, I wanted to let you know about some of events that we have coming up with Riverside Juniors. Tonight, we're hosting our fall meet and greet over at La Barra. So after tonight's meeting, if you'd like to find out more about juniors and enjoy some appetizers and a glass of wine, please head on over to La Barra. We'll be there until 9:30. We also have our next general meeting. Our November general meeting is next week, Thursday, November 9th, so a week from tonight, at 7:30 right here in this room. So if you'd like to come and hear more about what Juniors is all about, anyone in the public is welcome to come to any of our meetings. And this is our last meeting for this year. And then after November, if you're not able to get with us next week, come on to the January meeting. And then also, we're hosting our annual Breakfast with Santa, again in this room. It's a popular room. So our Jingle Jolly Gingerbread event is going to be Saturday, December 9th. We're going to have 2 seatings with Santa at 8 a.m. and then at 10:30 a.m. And those who come could have breakfast treats. We're going to have craft projects, different games that the children can play, and then they'll get to visit with Santa and tell them what they'd like to see on Christmas morning, as well as get a professional photograph taken with Santa that then they could, that will then be sent to the families after the fact. So if you'd like more information about any of these events, please go to our website, riversidejuniors.org. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to the reports of village officers. I have no report tonight. Manager Francis?
I have no report.
Moving on now to the approval of the consent agenda. The following items are on the consent agenda. Approval of voucher bills, approval of voucher list of bills for November 2, 2017. File and review the following. Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes for November 2, 2017. File and review Preservation Commission regular meeting minutes August 10, 2017. Preservation Commission special meeting minutes September 6, 2017. Go back to that in a minute. Preservation Commission special meeting minutes September 26, 2017. Riverside Historical Commission meeting minutes September 18, 2017. And the Police Department monthly reports for August and September 2017. A resolution authorizing the sale or disposal of personal property owned by the Village of Riverside. A resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a 2018 supplemental statement of work in the amount of $39,837.20 with Municipal GIS Partners, Inc. for the provision of GIS services through the GIS Consortium. A resolution of the Village of Riverside, Illinois, waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to execute a contract for emergency work on an as-needed basis with Riccio Construction Corporation. And lastly, a resolution waiving competitive bidding and awarding an at-risk construction management contract for designer-led design build of the Forest Avenue Bridge lighting project in the amount of $71,900 to Christopher B. Burke Engineering. Are there any items that any trustee needs to be removed for discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Peters. Second by Mr. Gisa. Please call the roll.
Trustee Gisa.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Sedvey.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries. There's obviously
Can you, Joe? Still not working on TV on? Okay, thank you.
Item B that I read was a file and review the Village Board of Trustee regular meeting minutes for November 2nd, 2017. That's obviously incorrect because there aren't any minutes yet because we're having that meeting. So let's get the correct.
That's my mistake. That should be October 19th.
October
My
19th.
apologies.
So with that amendment, the approval of the consent agenda passes. Okay. Next up are reports of departments, commissions, and trustee liaisons. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to the departments. We have 3 items tonight. The estimate of the 2017 property tax levy for the Village of Riverside and Public Library, the announcement of the public hearing for 2017 property tax levy ordinance on November 16th, and the announcement of public hearing for the 2018 budget ordinance on November 16th. Director Johns.
Good evening. Tonight, the village announces its estimate of the 2017 property tax levy, as well as the 2017 tax levy estimate for the Riverside Public Library. The state of Illinois Truth in Taxation Law requires that the village calculate the dollar amount of the aggregate property tax levy for 2017. Such calculation needs to be performed no less than 20 days prior than the village board meeting adopting such levy. The 2017 tax levy ordinance is scheduled for adoption on December 7th, 2017. Included in your agenda packet is a worksheet that details out the calculations of the 2017 property tax levy for the village. As a non-home rule community, the village tax levy can only increase by the lesser of 5% over the prior year's levy or the percentage increase in the consumer price index plus any new growth. Since the percentage increase in the consumer price index was 2.1% and it's lesser than 5%, the final actual 2017 tax levy is expected to increase approximately 2.1% plus any new growth. Keeping all this in mind, the following tax levy estimate is for 2017 for the village capped funds is $4,810,772 and $975,246 for the non-capped funds for a total levy of $5,786,017. Of this levy amount, $403,438 will be abated, which will result in a net 2017 levy for the village of Riverside being $5,382,580. This represents approximate increase of 3.5% over the prior year's levy of $5,200,464. The Cook County Tax Extension Office will subsequently adjust the 2017 levy once the actual new growth limit is known. The only update that's currently projected to this levy estimate is the actual cost of the bonds, which will be discussed later in today's board meeting. For the Riverside Public Library, the estimated 2017 tax levy is calculated at $1,100,500, which is an increase of approximately 3.63% over the prior year's final levy of $1,061,973. Are there any questions from the board regarding the tax levy estimate? Okay. Next, we are announcing a public hearing of the 2017 tax levy estimate. There will be a public hearing for the 2017 tax levy for the Village of Riverside and the Riverside Public Library is to be held on Thursday, November 16th, 2017 at 7 p.m. in Room 4 of Township Hall at 27 Riverside Road, Riverside, Illinois, 60546. In accordance with the state law, the village will publish notice of this public meeting in the November 8th edition of the Riverside Landmark newspaper. At this meeting, I will be presenting the 2017 levy ordinance for the village and the public library. Actual adoption of the tax levy ordinance is scheduled for Thursday, December 7th, 2017. A copy of the public notice in the agenda for the public hearing is included in the board packet. Tonight, the village also announces that a public hearing for the proposed budget for fiscal year 2018 and public library is to be held on Thursday, November 17th, immediately after the public hearing for the 2017 property tax levy is adjourned, and will take place in Room 4 of Township Hall, located at 27 Riverside Road, Riverside, Illinois, 60546. A notice of this public hearing will also be in the November 8th, 2017 edition of the Riverside Landmark, and I will be presenting the ordinance for the annual budget and public library budget. Actual adoption of this budget ordinance is scheduled for Thursday, December 7th, 2017.
Stay right there. We're coming right back to you. But I'm being told that there is a problem with the feed to, is it the television feed that is not going through? So, Mr. Doria, there's an option for folks to watch this live. Is that on YouTube? Could you come up and just, do you know what the URL is for them to go to watch it?
They wouldn't know to watch it though.
Oh, they can't hear it. That's right.
Everybody concentrate. If you have friends at home, call them and tell them that they can watch it on this site.
You can see this broadcast at riversidetv.us. And hopefully it'll be up on riversidetv.us.
And it is being recorded and available with sound.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Yes.
The issue isn't that they can't see it. The issue is they can't hear it.
Yeah.
The audio.
So maybe that will decide. We do.
We're working on it to try to get the sound up. But as Trustee Sevy pointed out, this is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it in its entirety with sound at a later time. Next up are ordinances and resolutions. An ordinance providing for the issue of approximately $611,000 general obligation limited tax refunding bond, Series 2017, for the purpose of providing the revenue source for the payment of certain outstanding obligations of the village, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal of and interest on said bonds, authorizing and directing the execution of an escrow agreement in connection with the issue of said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof. Ms. Johns.
Earlier this week, the board was provided an agenda packet that contained a brief description of the purpose of this most recent bond issuance, the General Obligation Limited Tax Refunding Bonds, Series 2017, and a draft of the related ordinance. The board was notified that the actual bidding on these bonds would occur this morning, November 2nd, 2017. Actual bids were in fact received and opened this morning, and Mr. Kevin McKenna from Spear Financial is in attendance tonight and will be providing additional details concerning the bidding process. Now that final bids have been received, Chapman & Cutler, our bond counsel, has provided a revised bond ordinance that was distributed to the board earlier today. So before I introduce Mr. McKenna, and I will read aloud the revised and final title of the bond ordinance. For board consideration tonight is an ordinance provided for the issue of $611,000 general obligation limited tax refunding bonds, Series 2017, of the Village of Riverside, Cook County, Illinois, for the purpose of providing the revenue source for the payment of certain outstanding obligations of said village, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest of said bonds, authorizing and directing the execution of an escrow agreement in connection with the issue of said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to Forest Park National Bank and Trust Company. I would now like to introduce Mr. Kevin McKenna of Spear Financial.
Good evening. This is your bond issue to do the refinancing. You do this about every 2 years. Last time was 2015. So today we took bids. The best bidder was Forest Park National Bank. The average bid was rate was 1.57. Interestingly enough, this is only 1/4% higher than it was 2 years ago, when it was 134. So rates really haven't moved that much in the 2 years. But I think this is a good bid. We had been projecting much closer to the 2% that the second bidder, Hinsdale Bank, came in with. So I think that this was a strong bid. You recall that this is done with a term sheet. This is a very low cost bidding situation. We do a term sheet which is included in the packet that I think everybody got a copy of. It shows that this funds will be used for the next couple of years to make payments on the Series 2010 A bonds, which is how it was set up originally. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions about the bid.
Trustees?
This bid is firm now? I mean, they're locked into their bid?
Yes, they are.
Binding?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a firm bid, and we talked to the banker who said he's a resident, and he wanted to be supportive of the village.
Thank you. I've had some discussions with Village Manager Francis and Director Johns. Within 2 years, we think we'll be able to retire this, or we're going to explore retiring this out of our debt service reserve. Essentially what we're doing here is we're paying debt service on debt service. So even though it's a low interest rate, it's a compounded interest rate. And obviously if you look at the return we're getting on our cash balances, it's a fraction of what we're paying in interest. So historically, we've needed this for some financial flexibility. I think we've got this issue down to a level where village debt service reserves will be able to cover it post 2019. So staff will be looking into that.
Further comments, questions? I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the bond ordinance. Motion by Mr. Ballerine, second by Mr. Githa. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Aye. Trustee Thompson. Aye. Trustee Ballerine. Aye. Trustee Sedem. Aye. Trustee Peters. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Director Johns. So we move on now to considerations, and up this evening is the video gambling discussion. I'd just like to say a couple things before we really wade into it. We all know that this has been a very controversial issue. I want to emphasize that this is also an issue that reasonable people of goodwill can disagree on. The only thing that really has disturbed me over the last few weeks has been the few calls that we've had that we shouldn't be discussing this at all. I simply could not disagree more. It seems to me that in a democracy, the most important things to talk about are the controversial things. I've always believed that the strength of an idea is really dependent upon its ability to withstand scrutiny, and that it's only the weak ideas that need to have the cover of darkness. So I'm delighted that we are having this discussion this evening. I think it is the proper thing to do. The other thing that I think I would like to remind everybody is that everyone in this room, without exception, is trying to do what they believe is the best they can do for the village of Riverside. There are times that we will disagree about what that means. But I think when we do have those disagreements, the most important thing is that we remember to treat each other in a manner that leaves the doors open and not closed. I mean, respect and civility are the pillars of our democracy, and they belong nowhere more certainly than here in Riverside, that really has that as our foundation. So we have lots of folks here this evening who have taken their time to come out. We have also received a lot of input prior to this meeting from folks. So the way we're going to proceed is Manager Francis is going to introduce the topic, talk about some of the various materials and information that we've been given as a board. And then I'm going to ask that the trustees have a preliminary discussion about what their current feelings are on this matter. If there is a majority of trustees who do not want this to move forward, then that will be the end of the formal consideration of that matter by the board. If there's a majority that do want it to move forward to further discussion, at that point I will open the floor up to public comment. We'll hear from everybody who's here, and then the trustees will again discuss the topic and make whatever decisions they feel that are necessary. So that's how we're going to work through things. So with that, I'll turn it over to Director Francis. Manager Francis. Sorry.
Former director.
Former director.
Before I start with the executive summary in relation to video gaming, I wanted to notify the village board that I received this evening a notification, or rather a request from Brian Carroll, the owner of Molly's Public House. He is formally rescinding his request for video gaming at this time. So I wanted to make the board aware of that. Providing a brief history with regard to video gaming in the Village of Riverside. Currently, the Village of Riverside does not participate in video gaming. An ordinance enacted in 1998 strictly prohibits the use of video gaming terminals. The Video Gaming Act was enacted in July of 2009. This authorized video gaming to be placed in certain establishments, and the statute is included in the board's packet for your reference. Though the village has the authority over whether to opt in and allow video gaming, the Act provides that the Illinois Gaming Board has jurisdiction over and shall supervise all gaming operations under the Act. Currently, there are over 40 municipalities in Cook and DuPage County that do not allow video gaming. In the fall of 2015, the village board discussed video gaming, and the Economic Development Commission held an informational session regarding this matter. And that was in collaboration with the Riverside Chamber of Commerce. After that point in time, staff was awaiting a formal recommendation from the chamber. We have not received any formal recommendation as of this date. On July of 2017, a local business owner had attended the board meeting and had requested that the village revisit the issue and provide a formal decision with regard to this. The village board directed that the Economic Development Commission discuss and provide a recommendation to the village board. On September 14th, 2017, the EDC discussed video gaming and recommended that the ordinance prohibiting this activity remain in effect and the village not allow video gaming. At the conclusion of the EDC discussion of video gaming, it was mentioned that video gaming is off-brand and not consistent with the branding and marketing initiatives discussed by the Commission. A similar comment was made by village trustees when this was discussed in 2015. Included within the packet are all the supporting materials relative to those discussions, both in 2015 and 2017. Also, the 1998 ordinance that was approved at that point in time. In 2015, it was also requested that Chief Weitzel provide some information, which is also included as part of that packet, and board materials, and anything related to the EDC discussion that was provided. Also, staff provided information relative to North Riverside, Brookfield, and Berwyn of what is permitted in those communities for discussion purposes. And you'll note that there's no action on this item currently. The board needs to discuss this matter and provide direction to village staff at this point in time.
Thank you.
Could I just ask one quick question? I was reading Mr. Carroll's body language. Could you maybe perhaps read his email versus summarizing it for us?
Certainly.
Mr. Carroll, is that appropriate?
I am formally rescinding my request for video gaming at this time, but reserve the right to apply for a Riverside gaming license if a referendum of the residents approves a gaming initiative. Brian Carroll.
Okay, so I guess I'm not sure whether that changes things or not. The question that was going to be before us this evening prior to that statement by Mr. Carroll was whether the village's current prohibition of video gaming should receive further consideration by the board. So to make it clear, the only thing we're talking about tonight is whether this should go to the next step of having an ordinance drafted that the board would then consider. So really the question tonight is whether we want to move to that step. So it's unclear to me whether exactly how Mr. Carroll's rescission affects people's feelings about that. So probably the easiest way for me to find that out is just to go around and ask. So Trustee Pollock is not here tonight, but he did send a statement that he asked to be read. So I'll ask Manager Francis to read that, and then we'll just go around the table and hear people's thoughts.
President Sells and Trustees, I will not be at the Board of Trustees meeting on Thursday, November 2nd. Knowing that the intent of the discussion regarding video gambling is to determine if there is a consensus to proceed to an ordinance, I want to let the board know my position on this issue. I am not in favor of removing the prohibition on video gambling. The primary reason for my objection is that I believe there is substantial negative stigma attached to video gambling, and it is a stigma that may negatively impact our economic standing in the near west suburbs. The villages that we compete with for new businesses, for consumers, and for new residents do not allow video gambling. Villages such as LaGrange, Western Springs, Oak Park, Hinsdale, and Clarendon Hills. My concern is that the stigma attached to video gambling will hurt our economic position relative to these other communities. Additionally, there is substantial evidence that video gambling is not necessary for a successful downtown business or business environment. Looking at comparable suburban areas, Western Springs, Hinsdale, and Clarendon Hills are obvious examples. I see successful downtowns and successful businesses in those downtowns with no video gambling. Finally, this is a community values issue, and all indications are that the community does not want video gambling. For these reasons, I do not support allowing video gambling in Riverside. Trustee Doug Pollock.
Trustee Gisa.
I am in favor of drafting an ordinance on video gambling for us to review as village trustees. Without a formal draft of the proposed terms, I am not comfortable making a decision about taking away an opportunity to help our business owners and to create a potentially new bucket of revenue for the village. I respect all suggestions and will openly listen before casting a vote for or against a written ordinance. I hope that my fellow residents will support me in my effort to conduct further due diligence on such a heated debate if given the opportunity to proceed with due process. On a side note, I would like to apologize to Forest Park, Lyons, Berwyn, Brookfield, and North Riverside for some of the comments that have been directed at your residents and business owners. I am incredibly grateful for the resources you provide our small town and my family, the dual support you provide to our police and fire departments, as well as the investment in our community you make by sharing our schools.
Mr. Lawson.
All right, so I'm going to go a little bit less formal and just talk through a little bit about the research that I've done to share with everybody. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for the emails, the train ride conversations, the people that stopped by the house, and had the opportunity to talk about this. That's the only way that I see that the trustees can make good informed decisions. So everybody that sent me an email or everybody that stopped by and everybody that talked to me about this issue, I greatly respect that and hope that it will continue not only on this issue but on any other issue. So to kind of roll that together, I made a matrix out here. Being a architect, technocrat kind of person, I've got data points from everybody that sent me an email to try and work through, methodically think through what's fair and reasonable. And what's interesting about that and what I want to share is I received 33 emails against us relaxing the village ordinance that's currently in place. I received 23 communications, both email, written letters, stop by the house, and phone calls telling us to relax or asking us to relax it. So if you think about that in big numbers with 6,500, 6,600 taxable voters in town, we've got less than 5% or less than 0.5% that have reached out to us on either side. So I'd really like to hear from that 99% that's been silent on it, because we have people that are against it and we have people that are for it. And even though that Brian was the vehicle that was willing to operate it out of his store, I don't think the rhetoric that I've heard on Facebook and things like that is fair and reasonable. Brian's a business owner in town. This is not about saving his business. This is about providing an opportunity for that 0.5% of people that have asked us to think about this. And I think that pushing it forward to create a draft proposal and a draft ordinance of some language for all of you to look at to see if we can somehow balance out the differences between our neighbors, the 0.5% for and the 0.5% against, I think is our obligation as board members. I don't think that we can just brush it under the rug right away because there's some of us that may or may not like it. I personally don't gamble. I personally have never tossed any money in a video gaming machine, but that's not my deal. This is not Scottsville, Wendellsville, Bennsville, or anybody else's. This is your town, and it's Riverside. I don't know if your guys are separated on sides out there right now, but again, I think that that's my point is to try and make sure that we have due process. As comparison, when we had another divisive issue that came up, chickens and bees and things like that, we afforded the opportunity for people to sit down and try and create an ordinance that would allow both for and against to be able to live in harmony. That's the value of Riverside. That, to me, is what makes Riverside the off the grid or the jewel in the rough, is that we live beside each other in harmony in a great place, even though we disagree with each other on certain things. So my reason for trying to push this forward to the next step, I still have not made up my mind whether it's appropriate or not. I think we need to talk about wonderful comments that I received from people that need to be discussed. Is, do we want to have this because it leads to addictions? Is there moral issues? Is it off-brand? Is it a valuable entertainment for elderly people? These are both pros and cons that need to be vetted out. So my position right now is that we're obligated to move it forward, just as we've done with bees, where we only had 3 or 4 people come up and ask us to consider it. We had chickens, people wanted to have chickens, a few of those folks are here today, and we had 5 people come forward, and we spent the energy to try and draft a proposal for that. So tonight it's not about whether or not we're going to have gaming in Riverside or not, it's whether or not we're going to be respectful to spend the time and energy to see if there is a solution to have it in town, whether it's in B1, B2, or nowhere, or 2 locations, or 0 locations. It's just too premature to be making that decision. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Valerie?
I like to read my stuff. I'm not so well off the cuff like that. I believe we have too many important issues right now to solve, and at this moment, this happens not to be one of them. I believe we need to move on and leave this issue for another time in another forum. This issue, in my opinion, and this gets at your 99%, in my opinion, should be a referendum item where the Riverside residents can vote, and we as a village board will honor that outcome. I would like to ask our staff and lawyers tonight, with the permission of the board, to start researching the proper question to be added to the November 2018 ballot. The job of the board is actively to listen to residents and to take those opinions into consideration when making decisions. Over the past couple of weeks, residents have discussed various aspects of this issue. One thing that was completely apparent is that residents voiced their opinion on this matter, but also many came together as a community. A number of residents posted ideas and ways to help our businesses, many of which this village has already done. I would ask that these residents that are here tonight and watching from home to support and patronize our local businesses. Make an active choice to eat, shop, or obtain services from a Riverside business at least once a week. Believe in and support the brand you are asking us to build. And on a personal note, Brian is a good man. He's a father, he's a restaurateur, and he's tried very hard to grow and build his business. Many of things have been said over the past few weeks, and today with social media, sometimes our fingers hit return faster than our brains work. I know many of you appreciate Brian. I appreciate Brian, and I want him and what he has brought to our village. I would like us all to try to show him that this is a great town to do business in. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Asha. We appreciate you.
My original notes are clearly out the window now, but I do echo everything I've heard before and don't really have a lot more to add to it. I'm not going to hide behind the fact that I was definitely supportive and remain supportive of discussing this. I think reasonable minds and everyone that I've talked to that had reasonable objections could come to a compromise. So to close the door before we've had a discussion is poor governance. It's very poor governance. Hopefully this board has learned something in this process, because I think a lot of mistakes were made in the process. Hopefully we can fix that. Hopefully we can all learn not to get so worked up about things. I really don't think if it passed or didn't pass, it would have made a material difference to the village if done properly. So some of the language is unfortunate, and hopefully we can get over that and get back to supporting our businesses. I don't think that there's many more important objectives that we have as a board than economic development right now. We are too reliant on real estate taxes. The alternative to some of these things we discuss are higher taxes, and I'm sure that most people are more against that than some of the other things we talk about. So I would like to see people with more of an open mind. The discussion was unfortunate at times, but we've seen a lot worse on a lot of different matters. But we don't want to fall into the same trap that led to other poor decisions being made here either. And I think as a board, the easy thing for us to do would have been to say no and kowtow to a very vocal, who knows, minority or majority of the village. But we owe more than that. We have a representative democracy, not a democracy, and there's really a reason for that. So I do support continued discussion. A referendum, I never really feel that a referendum, policymaking by referendum is a good thing. What I was probably going to suggest is if we could come to some compromise on language. We do it in a trial period, and after a trial period, then I'm happy putting it to a referendum. You put something to a referendum now, there's time and energy expended. We are potentially inviting outside elements to the village to either support or oppose the referendum, and I don't know if that's necessarily good for the village either. So that's all I have. Thank you.
So, Mr. Sevi, just because I'm not quite clear, so are you saying that you do want to move forward with further consideration, or at this point?
I do. I think we've got people here, and we want them to be heard, right?
Yes. Okay. So you want to hear from the folks who are here tonight?
Yes, absolutely.
And then make a decision later?
I assume people here want to be heard from. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Peters?
I would first like to say that for me, I sort of disagree with you, Trustee Lumsden. This is an issue of supporting a local business who is going through a hard time. My heart truly goes out to that, and I hope it's okay for us as a board to be able to say that, because communities like us, we have to support each other. And when I hear about a struggling business trying to provide health insurance for their family, how that doesn't just make you want to help them in any way possible it's a struggle for me. But with that said, I am approaching this decision from a perspective of who has the burden of proof here. I'm an attorney, that's how I approach problems. And to me, the person who is, the party that has the burden of proof is the party that is trying to change the ordinance. And at this point, I have not seen enough evidence to support that. That doesn't mean that it couldn't exist. I do find it interesting and telling that you mentioned a lot of folks have spoken to you. Not one has spoken to me directly, other than emails. So I find that interesting, one way or the other. I'm part of this board, and I've not received very much input at all from anyone other than the emails and through the Economic Development Commission's meetings. So that's where I've gathered my evidence from. And I also find it interesting that the Chamber has not spoken on this. I think that speaks volumes. With that said, I don't have enough evidence right now to present an opinion, I don't have enough evidence to change the ordinance in my mind, to vote for changing the ordinance in my mind. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't be able to come to that conclusion if evidence was presented, but at this point, I haven't seen it, and so I'd have to vote no.
So at this point, we have 3 trustees who would like to move forward with drafting an ordinance and 3 trustees who would not. I'm just curious, of the folks who are here, if you're opposed to video gambling, can you raise your hand? Now, leave your hands up for a second. If I were to tell you that we were going to draft an ordinance that would make sure that video gambling was in back rooms, out of sight, that you wouldn't be able to hear it, that we wouldn't allow any kind of outdoor signage, that we would only allow existing businesses who had been here for 2 years or more to have it, if that would make a difference to you, put your hand down. Okay, thank you. So this I find to be the compelling problem here. I mean, it seems like we each have a constituency that talks to us. I have 64 emails here in opposition to video gambling. I have 4 in favor. What I found really interesting in these emails and the conversations I've had, and this, with all due respect to Mr. Lumsden and Mr. Sevi and Mr. Gisa, this notion that somehow in this instance that we can draft an ordinance that will bridge the gap, that we'll find a consensus where all of you that raised your hands wouldn't raise your hands, I find unbelievable. Because my read of this isn't that people are against this because it's not in a back room or it's not covered up with all kind of restrictions and safeguards. They're against it because they think it's wrong for Riverside. They think that, I mean, we spent over $40,000 on a branding and marketing campaign. And we all heard the beautiful language at our last meeting that resulted from that. How you come into town and it's a different way of thinking. We're a gym, we're a jewel, we're an escape, we're an oasis. We're a place that graced by nature and beauty. That is the issue. I object to the euphemisms. You know, we're not talking about gaming. We're talking about slot machines next door to residences. And when I read this overwhelming opposition, and that opposition is based on that core point that it's against our branding, it tarnishes our image, it reduces the glow of our national historic landmark heritage. It weakens our sense of community, I mean, the bickering, the divisiveness, and it diminishes all of these branding and marketing efforts we've worked so hard on. So I just don't get it. I don't know why we would move forward with something when we know, as of tonight, we know that there are 4 votes, at least 4 votes, to prohibit video gambling in Riverside. So it's done. So here's an interesting piece of history about the video gaming ordinance or statute.
I thought it was done.
Yeah, this is that. Is it done?
Let it be done. We know what your opinion is. This isn't good governance. You've rammed it down our throat. Let it be done then.
See you later.
Right now, it's 3-3.
You just said 4 votes.
Mr. Pollock's not here.
You're contradicting yourself.
Mr. Pollock's not here.
You're not here.
Right, so from a legal standpoint, you don't get under Illinois law to vote in absentia. So I think we know Mr. Pollock's opinion. It was clear, and you could say that, you know, that there are 4 people who have established a position of being in opposition. But the question before you today is, do we continue to discuss this? And on that point, for the people who are here, it's 3-3.
So just
Doug's comment doesn't say he doesn't move it forward. He says he's against it. Doesn't say anywhere in his letter that he doesn't have an issue with us continuing to do research.
So
we owe it to the little 0.5% over there to treat it the same way. This is about governance, not about video gaming. This is about proper protocol and fair and reasonable treating of that small little 0.5% fraction out there, not to be swayed by the small 0.5% fraction that showed up today and had the courage to come, and I thank you for that. This is about good governance, less about video gaming, in my opinion, right now. This is about doing the right thing and the same thing and being consistent with the way we treated the people in town that wanted chickens, the way we treated the people in town that wanted bees, the way we treated the people in town that wanted picnicking. We haven't seen a petition. That's my point. We're not yet.
Yeah, hold on just a second.
But see, that's what I want this comment.
Well, we're going to get it. We're going to get it. But can I finish my comment first? Thank you. Technically, where we are is this. If there are 3 votes in the affirmative, I get the vote. So right now, there are 3 votes that want to move forward with drafting an ordinance. There's 3 votes that don't, where Mr. Pollock's vote doesn't count. So given a tie, there is no vote. There's no vote present to move forward with drafting an ordinance. That's the legality of it.
And there's no way to kill it without Doug being there.
Exactly. So where we are is with the people, since, I mean, we all know where Mr. Pollock stands, but technically, what Mr. Lumsden says is true. So what we can't take a formal vote, because this wasn't up for a formal vote tonight. So I guess one question I'd have from a procedural standpoint, since we can't take in, we're not going to move forward with drafting an ordinance. So if we go to the next meeting when Mr. Pollock is here, what will be before us?
Same thing.
Whether we want to move forward
we will
to
have
draft.
we will have heard from the people that had the courage to come, and
So
it will
that's
give
where we
other
are.
people a chance to respond now that it's out there.
Okay.
That's all.
Can someone please answer my request for the referendum? How exactly would that work? And are we even interested?
See, that's another perfect thing. I just think we're premature in this. I think we're snubbing the nose on that small percentage of people that have brought it to the table. And again, the only reason I excluded Brian from that is I see this less about Brian in one small business. I see this as about the people that have rallied around wanting to have that as an entertainment. Whether you agree with it or not, we have an obligation to give it due process.
But can you explain to me the process if we end up going for referendum, how that works?
Sure. So the village board has the ability to put an advisory referendum on the November 2018 election. You would adopt an ordinance that gets filed with the county, and it is placed on the ballot.
And when would we have to have that?
I don't know the timing exactly. You have plenty of time because the election's quite a ways away, but I'm guessing by midsummer 2018.
And it would be an advisory only, but could we make a point that if it is a positive for gaming, that this board is obligated to follow the requests of the residents?
Right. So the board doesn't have the ability under the Video Gaming Act or state law to initiate a binding referendum question on this particular point. You do have the ability to make it advisory, and you certainly have the ability to say to the residents, this board will follow whatever that vote turnout is.
Well, why wouldn't we? I want. That's what we're trying to get to. The problem is we've got a small little percentage that had the courage to just speak out on this side, and a small little percentage that had the courage to speak on this side. We've got a big chunk of unknown in the middle. A referendum would solve that.
I agree with you. 10 years ago, I put a non-binding referendum on the ballot and brought it to this board, and they didn't pay attention to it. So I just wanted to make sure that we do that.
Who said we have a petition? Because I would love to see that. Does it have 300 votes on it or 6,000?
Sure. Anything else from the trustees at this point? So what we'll do is we'll have public comment, and after everybody's had a chance to speak, we'll circle back and the trustees and talk some more. Yeah, you do need to come up to the podium, state your name and your residence, and then so that folks at home can hear and see what you have to say. If you speak up really loud so people can hear you.
What we heard to begin with was if there was a majority, then we would move to public comment. What I just heard is there was not a majority. So I'm a little bit confused just on the process here as it was explained.
Let me try it again because it is confusing. If we were to honor Trustee Pollock's statement, there would be a majority that says end it now and be done with it. But Trustee Pollock isn't here. And because of that, it's a tie vote, 3-3, as to whether to move forward with drafting an ordinance. Now, in reality, what will happen at the next meeting is there will be a motion to draft an ordinance, and there will be discussion, and then presuming things remain the same, 4 people will say no, and that will be the end of it. But that's what 3 people up here want to happen. So with that said, it is, whether it's an open question is a matter of your interpretation. I mean, if you believe that those 4 votes are going to remain steady, then it's done. But you're here. If you would like to address the board and give us your thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Let me add, though, I heard Trustee Ballerine, even though he said voted no, I heard him say you wanted to explore a referendum. I heard Trustee Peters say while she's not convinced of a position. I didn't hear say I don't want to hear anything. And I don't think it's appropriate to say this matter's dead. I mean, people are here. If they want to talk, let's let them talk.
What did I just say?
You said the matter's dead.
Did I just say we're here, and if you wish to speak, we'd like to hear from you?
Okay.
I believe that's what I said. So, who would like to start?
Good evening, trustees and President Sells, and thank you for listening to all your residents, pro and con. We appreciate it. My name is Mary Cerrone. I live at 168 Olmsted Road, and I own 2 properties in Riverside. My parents and my brothers also live in this town as well. Therefore, I can say that my family loves this town and finds it a unique and special privilege to live here. I would like the board to vote a unanimous no for video gambling terminals, or VGTs. Recently, a study titled "Can't Stop the One-Armed Bandits: The Effects of Access to Gambling on Crime," which was written by Nicholas Botan, Ignacio Sarmiento Barbieri, who are both University of Illinois Department of Economics, and Andres Ham, who's from Universidad de los Andes School of Government, published a 47-page report in August of 2017, so it's rather recent. And it sets off alarms about video gambling terminals and access and its relationship to crime. The study was not regional or state-specific. The analysis was done on a block level, and I do have a copy of the report for you, just one because it was 47 pages, so I was trying to save trees.
Actually, give it to Jessica, they can scan it and get it to us. That would be great. Sure. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Not to be long here, the study, as I mentioned, is 47 pages long, and in an effort to be brief, here are the main conclusions. It basically studied the suburban areas around Chicago. And it said that access to gambling, this was the conclusion, increases property and violent crimes. Most of the effects on violent crimes are driven by robbery, which increased 13.1%. Statistically, significant increases in aggravated battery were 5.99%, and sexual assault, 14.1%. Increase in property crime, mostly driven by an increase in motor vehicle thefts of 12.3%. Burglary and larceny also increased by 5.6% and 4.78%. The second conclusion it drew was that these were all new crimes rather than displaced incidents. And the third conclusion was that these effects seem to be persistent over time, meaning that the effect of access to VGT on crime seems to be permanent. So in essence, 5,550 additional violent and property crimes in Chicago occurred since VGT Act took effect. I personally believe that our police are burdened enough managing our town safety with all the issues that are presented and plague Riverside, that if in fact there is a link, that's an additional burden that I would not like to see placed on our police and fire, etc. And the second and vital reason I think to vote no is the risk to Riverside's opportunity to be considered a World Heritage status. I understand and I believe that President Stack had been working on this effort, ex-President Stack, excuse me. There's a big demand for nice houses in attractive villages. The overall general effect is a supply and demand calculus. By driving up demand for property, Within that designation, that only increases property values. The inscription of Riverside on the World Heritage List will open the door for endless possibilities of investments. It will allow us to dream a little bigger, to draw and create an extension of that magical summer vacation village in a beautiful setting that's only 20 minutes from the urban jungle. The introduction of video gambling could threaten this possible designation. Once the genie's out of the bottle, the damage is done. Becoming starts with a vision. Is our vision classy or trashy? Do we want to be just another small town with signs saying slots here, banners waving slots? You know, I drive by PJ Clem's, and it's starting to resemble the Lions establishments of old, for which many residents fought to change throughout the decades. Lastly, I'm going to leave you all with one question, and certainly our trustees as well. The restaurants we have are currently a family setting. It's where we connect with our loved ones, our friends, our coworkers. It's where we engage with our children for time with their families. Once you possibly exclude children, is it a family setting any longer? Thank you, and thank you for opening it up for conversation.
Thank you, Mary. Mr. Sundstrom.
Mary?
Ms. Saron, just Mr. Bud.
If you don't mind, you gave us a lot of crime data, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm not up here to debate anything, and I don't want to debate anything, but I think as this moves forward, that this particular meeting may be something that people refer back to. So
certainly.
Thank you for that.
I'm glad if they do.
So we'll make sure that information gets out. But I would like to ask our police chief if he can give us a little bit of data that he collected, because I know you talked to the neighboring towns around us, and I think that would also be important because it is more localized. Your other concerns are obviously valid ones also, but I just, to that data one, I'd like to talk to.
Sure.
Absolutely. So President Sells, trustees, and Manager Francis, back in September of 2015, the manager, Francis, asked me to contact municipalities that were adjacent to us or those that were close to us that had video gaming in September of 2015. Those towns I contacted were Berwyn, Brookfield, Hotchkins, Lyons, McCook, and North Riverside. At that time, they had video gaming. I was asked them specific questions. One of them was, do they track calls for service, police calls for service to establishments that have video gaming? Each community did. And then I was asked to ask them if they had experienced an uptick in crime just because that current establishment added video gaming. And each police chief that I talked to said that they did not see an increase in crime. I asked them if they had an increase in burglaries to those establishments. And at that time, they had no burglaries reported at all. And also, it was a concern of the board back then on parking issues. So I also surveyed those police chiefs and asked them if they had had concerns or issues from their residents about parking issues around liquor establishments, bars, or restaurants that instituted video gaming, and they did not. And then my final question to those chiefs at that time was, had it impacted your calls for service and the way you police and putting a strain on your police department? And with the exception of Berwyn, which has a much larger force than anybody that I surveyed, none of them said that it put a burden on their police force at that time. Berwyn led the way. So when I did survey the chief, Berwyn had the most calls for service. But one thing that the Berwyn police told me at that time, he's no longer the chief there now, but when he was, is that they excluded calls that they would normally have at a bar or a restaurant. So they would routinely have some disturbance calls, some fights calls, but they were tracking between what would be a normal call for service and what led to the video gaming. And that's what the board wanted me to research in 2015, and there was not a single community at that time said that they had an issue with the video gaming, and that again was September of 2015. There are more communities around us that have it, but in 2015, those were the only communities doing video gaming.
Can you come up to the podium, please?
Yes, I'm just wondering if you know how the police departments might track sexual assaults being related to the introduction of video gambling, since they probably didn't occur at the establishments.
How other communities track their
Yeah,
sexual
the ones
assaults?
that you spoke to about video gambling that didn't see an increase in crime as a result of it. I'm wondering, for example, sexual assaults or things of that nature that didn't occur at the establishments. How would they relate them back to the establishments? Even if they were as a result of just a general.
I guess they would have to relate that back through investigation. So, I don't. The crimes can be reported at home, but the crime, when you respond to a home, the crime may have taken place at another location. So that would have to be done through investigation.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief White. Mr. Sundstrom.
Hi, I'm Eric Sundstrom. I live at 375 Uvedale Road. I have a business at 345 East Burlington. I've been a resident in this town for 60 years. I'm going to give you a little history of Riverside, some of the divisive issues that have happened over the years. Back in the 1940s, the Babson Estate, which is on the block where I live now, burned down. And for whatever reason, they decided that they would offer that land to the village for $1. The board refused. Why, I don't know, but they did. Personally, I think it's kind of stupid because they would have had more parkland. Fast forward to the 70s. There was a piece of land that was in between 22nd Street and 26th Street that was owned by the Concordia Teachers College. That's where the mall is now. That's where Costco is now. That's where a lot of businesses are. The owner came to the village board and said, I want you to annex me. The village board discussed it, and they said, well, we're worried about increasing with the police force, and we might not want to have it, and also, it was not part of the original Olmsted plan. My father, however, back then was privy to most of the people in the board, and the real reason why was they said, we don't want to make it Riverside because this guy's just going to make more money off of it when he sells the land. So, as my mother used to call it, that was cutting off your nose to spite your face, because that would have been a lot of tax money that we could have had for this town. Fast forward to the 80s. Kay Snyder, when she was on the board, wanted to have alcohol in town because alcohol was verboten. The town was dry. All she wanted to do was to have it in the stores, and it was only going to be beer and wine. Eventually, when it did get passed, then they went to some of the restaurants, and it was alcohol too. That's how Choo Choo first got theirs. But for all of her troubles, she got a brick thrown through her front picture window of her business because somebody didn't like it. But it passed, and where would we be now in town if you couldn't serve alcohol? You wouldn't have Choo Choo, you wouldn't have Labara, you wouldn't have 34, you wouldn't have Molly's, okay? Once again, things change, things become acceptable. Finally, the last one I really thought was really weird was they wanted to put a bike path in town. This was back in the late 90s. And the Olmsted Society at the time was against it because they didn't want riffraff coming into town and selling drugs. Speaking of selling drugs, what was everybody's thought about that guy in town right next to Labara that was pushing pills for 3 years? Did anybody complain about that? And finally, it took the state to get rid of the guy. Okay, so finally, my whole point about this is that it's short-sighted. You need to calm down. You need to discuss things, see what would be good, what would be bad. From what I'm understanding, that it's a little tiny room that might be in the back of some place. You're not excluding kids out because they can't get in there anyway. Connie's has one. I eat there all the time. I didn't even know it's there until somebody pointed it out to me. And if you don't like gambling, then get rid of bingo at the library get rid of scratch-off and lotto cards at Minuteman and at Riverside Foods. Don't allow football squares at any of the St. Mary's tailgate parties. You can go on and on. It's ridiculous. Gambling's everywhere. This is just some little small thing that might generate and might not generate some money for, Brian. But, it's worth a shot. And one final thing. Whoever the person was that called up Molly's and reamed Brian's wife over the phone and said all kinds of vile, nasty stuff, I hope something bad happens to you. I'm done.
Who's next? Yes, sir, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Nick Lambros. I live at 276 Maplewood Road. Been a resident there for almost 17 years, and I also have owned property for over 22 years in Riverside. Riverside has always had some difficulty attracting and or keeping businesses, but we have had recent upswing in recent years with additions such as La Barra, the Empanadas, and the once vacant store that is now, a retail space that is now Athletico. So we're here tonight to discuss the issue of video gaming, and ultimately the decision will be determined by the Board of Trustees, a board that the residents of Riverside have placed their trust in you as a board that should stay true to their wishes as residents who voted for you. Part of the discussion should include the Economic Development Commission, which you sought their input and recommendation, and they voted no on September 14th of this year, articulating that it did not promote the brand that is Riverside. The discussion should also include the hundreds of signatures and emails and the grassroots efforts that have come about opposing the change. The discussion should also include the justification for the residents and voters, and you should explain to them how and why supporting video gaming is good for us when so many, according to what has been said here, oppose it. Additionally, if the board is moving in a direction on changing the ordinance and using our money, it will take to draft amendments to our current ordinance, then why stop at gambling? Let's be open. We should explore ordinance amendments to include other businesses that wouldn't be eligible because they're not serving liquor, and maybe they are permitted by law in Illinois. Maybe we should explore opening our doors to methadone treatment centers, medical marijuana distribution centers, tattoo parlors, currency exchanges, adult bookstores, pawn shops, hookah bars. These are all businesses that want a footprint in a community, and let's include all of these in the discussion, and let's make it a destination place. Come to Riverside, because we've got all those. We recently lost the antique store, for example, a business that could not apparently compete as the owner intended it to do selling antiques. Just like Molly's, who is saying that they currently are struggling, and we, of course, now recently found out that they're pulling away from the decision to participate in gaming, but they had sought to shift their business model and become a somewhat of a gambling establishment or gaming establishment. As you discuss the issue, how is it fair for other businesses, like the beauty shop that might be suffering and having difficulty paying its bills or offering insurance to its employees? How about the garage that might be having difficulties? Or the florist? How is it fair for them that we should suggest that one business can participate in this because it's going to offer them more money, but other businesses don't have that chance? As a final thought, I want to also discuss why it is that when concerned citizens voice their discontent, we are subject to the following. When no gambling signs are placed on private property, they are stolen. They are clipped off with wire cutters. We've had stolen signs from private property, actually people walking up to garages where these signs are placed and staged for distribution, literally walk away with them and steal them. I made a police report recently. I've had eggs thrown on my tenants' cars and on my property, probably because, it might be coincidence, but it just seems odd that at this time, in the 17 years that I've been here, I've never had a problem like this. And all of a sudden, I have this problem, probably because I've voiced my opinion in a stronger way than just an email. So, interestingly enough, we've also been recently enlightened by the village of an ordinance that restricts the specific placement of our no gambling signs on front lawns that are considered private property and not public property. We found out that the village is now decided to enforce a 5-foot setback from the sidewalks because it's public way or easement. We've never had that issue addressed before with farmers market signs or other signs, talking about soccer tournaments or whatever, or even political signs that somebody might place on their front lawn. All of a sudden, it's become, we've been enlightened about this supposed ordinance. And I'm sure it's there, but interestingly that it's finally come up. And finally, I'm hopeful that my wife and I are not being targeted for standing up at the recent meeting on September 14th and also voicing our opinion along with shared opinions of many residents and others in the community who have kind of spearheaded this movement through signage and signatures and emails and a podium like this. My wife and I have suddenly been summoned to appear at a village hearing because a building permit that was issued for us for a devastating flood that we experienced on April 8th of 2013. We pulled the permit. That permit evidently has expired, and we're just now being informed that we have to appear in front of a committee to discuss this expired permit. Nowhere in the last 2.5 years has anybody ever said, your permit is expired, we need to have you update your permit. It's just interesting. There's something not right about all these things. It just doesn't feel right, and I'm just saddened by it, and I think others should be as well. And thank you. I hope somebody else will come up and speak. Thank you.
Yes, please. Oh, you want to go after Nick? Okay.
Nick Fournier, 305 Maplewood. Thank you guys for coming out and listening to all this. I had a much more elaborate preparation here, but, I kind of think the writing's on the wall for this. For me, this isn't about keeping people out or anything like that. There's two things. It comes down to branding, and it comes down to the state pushing this down our throats. I don't know how much you guys have looked at the data for the video gaming machines. I haven't gone into excruciating detail, but I like to pull some of this stuff. I'm going to name off a few names of establishments, and, well, we'll just read them and take them in. Lenny's Gas and Wash, LLC, Pilot Travel Centers, Chronister Oil Company, Road Ranger, LLC, Lenny's Food and Fuel, LLC. To a normal person, that's going to sound like I'm reading off a list of local places to get gas or diesel, great establishments, but those are actually 5 of the top 10 video gaming establishments in the state of Illinois. I don't know if that's the direction from a brand perspective that we want Riverside to go in, and really any business, quite frankly. And there's nothing wrong with running a gas station, but this is where these places, these devices, are really making money. Recently, going through some of the data, Brookfield, our neighbors, you know, the numbers here have changed substantially since this was brought up in 2015 into 2017. And I think for the most part across the board, they've gone down significantly. The only places that are making serious money from doing this are places like Dottie's, or places that I guess technically are considered bars, but when you go in there, functionally speaking, and this can be done at 12 or 1 in the afternoon, anyone that's in there is really just there to play the machines. Again, is that really the direction we want to push our businesses, we want to push our brand? For me, it's not. The state of Illinois has gone through years of mismanagement. This is essentially an indirect tax. The vast majority of the term that they use is net wagering activity. That's a nice term, but that's actually losses. That's $1.1 billion in losses that is going into these machines. That's money coming out of the economy. The state is taking the biggest chunk out of it. To me, this is nothing more than an indirect tax. This is not getting pumped back in to the economy in the way that anyone says or thinks it is. It's supporting the state, kind of, and it's basically a bailout or a parachute for them, and it's supporting the operators of these machines. And that is a very difficult industry to get into. They essentially have a monopoly on that. That's something that I don't want to support, and I don't want to see proliferated. To wrap it up, there's been a lot of divisive comments and things said, and I don't think that's fair or right. Some of the stuff really crosses lines. Eric, you had an impassioned speech. I don't know if he's still here. Fair enough. He just came up here and wished harm upon someone, and granted, whatever happened there, that sounds bad and not a good thing, but someone just came up and wished harm upon another human being in a public forum. I've had people call me racist, question my professional integrity. A bunch of things have been said, and I think that's absurd. Why are we dividing like that? This is not some type of race or class warfare. I think, Trustee Gisa, you talked about or apologized to our neighboring villages, and I think it's unfair to say because we don't want something that they have, that automatically means we have something against their village. There's a lot of businesses in other places that I don't think we want here. The example that comes to mind would be motels. Do we want a California-style motel on Harlem Avenue? That could generate a ton of more revenue than gaming machines. That could bring us in tax revenue. That could bring us in, we could put a tourist tax on it. I don't know if that's the kind of business that we want to see going forward. Just because we don't want that here doesn't mean we have anything against anyone from those other towns. And the bottom line is we need those people to come here and support the businesses to keep them going. So with that said, I appreciate everyone's effort and time that's been put into this. I appreciate the comments and thought. But going forward, I would hope that we really just literally can get along with each other because there's no reason for something like this to divide everyone. That's all I have. Thank you.
So do you mind if I respond to the comment? So Nick, to clarify my statement, that was a personal apology by me, and where it was written from was from calls that I received from people who live in those communities who follow some of the sites. It wasn't directed from the town, it was for me personally, so just to be clear on that. I mean, it's because of phones it's just friends of mine that live in those communities that reached out to me that were complaining to me. Nothing personal against anyone that's posting stuff. Back to what I said early on. I genuinely just want to understand things better. I'm not for or against any way right now. I just believe in going through the process and understanding what exactly it is, because I wasn't here 2 years ago. Just to clarify. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Pornia. Yes, please.
Good evening, President Sells and all the trustees. Thank you for your time tonight. Unlike many of the people that have come up here, I've not lived here my whole life. I've lived here 3 years with my husband, Matt, who is home with our 2 young children. And as parents of young children, we were seeking a new community to live in, and we were naturally attracted to Riverside as a family.
Can you give us your name, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Susan Wolf. I sent an email in, so you may have, and I'm at 243 Bartram. All the official stuff? Great. Okay. So I will stick to mostly my letter, so if I'm reading, I apologize, but I don't want to ramble. We are parents of young children seeking a new community to live in, and we were naturally attracted to Riverside for a family-focused village with a strong sense of community and an excellent school program. It's reinforced by Riverside's Economic Development Commission, and I won't belabor because it's come up a few times, but that they answer the question, why Riverside? Points being made to only one of 2 villages in the state designated as an arboretum. It's a hidden gem in suburban Cook County, incomparable design, pastoral setting, unparalleled small town ambience. All of these things that offer the American small town life that is often lost in this modern world. So as the village continues to provide the brand identity, we need to ask ourselves, is video gambling congruent with that character? Will it be what attracts residents and businesses aligned with our values and the highest standards of our town? We believe, and when I'm saying we, I'm speaking for my husband and I, Matt, we believe video gambling in local establishments presents a risk to the very ideals the village holds true and offers as a point of differentiation. Video gambling can lead to deteriorating aesthetics, increased safety concerns, and eroding values. Video gambling comes with cheap neon, large banners to draw people in to find semi-private over 18 sections separating patrons. These images do not fit in with the pastoral setting and our small town ambiance. In previous village meetings, as well as this evening, it was proposed video gambling signage would be highly regulated and establishments would keep the machines sequestered and out of sight of the general population of patrons. Should the village be supporting products or services that we aren't proud enough to display out in the open? The idea of people tucked away from general population engaging in adult activities does not suggest a safe, neighborly experience for residents and families. The idea of video gambling might be done in a controlled or limited manner just doesn't seem realistic. What will prevent these rules from being continually loosened or legally challenged, to the point made of bringing in the daddies, saying it's just for these types of businesses? It's going to keep getting challenged. Businesses will find a public way to market the new offering, so if we're saying they can't have signs, they will find a way to market it, or what's the point? It won't impact their bottom line. How much time and money is the village willing to spend overseeing this one very divisive business enticement? How much will it distract from developing more consistent and healthy incentives to lure more businesses aligned with the village's brand identity? As part of our search for a new home, we considered Riverside along with River Forest, Oak Park, LaGrange, Western Springs, and a couple of others. Common attributes in these communities are high-quality housing inventory, top-notch municipal services, strong sense of community, and a highly rated school system, supported by homeowners that were willing to bear the burden of high real estate taxes. None of these communities allow video gambling. As prospective buyers consider Riverside, the addition of video gambling may tip the scales in the wrong direction for those seeking a safe and pastoral setting versus similar neighboring communities, just will come off their list. This can lead to shrinking population of prospective new home buyers, declining property values, and ultimately lower tax revenue. It is a downward cycle. It is just not worth the short-term, modest economic upside. We fully understand the need for economic development in the village. And, the need to support our existing businesses and attract new ones. We shop local. We're not in Molly's lot. We have 2 small children. I'd love to be there more, honestly, but we do shop local, and we go to establishments that work for our family right now in Riverside. That being said, there are other avenues that can be pursued to support our business base, tax incentives that do produce results. I think there were 100 different ideas on Facebook this week of loans, some that are new, some that have been tried and done. But the percentage of money wagered that ultimately goes into the pocket of business owner and the village is minimal compared to the funds wagered and taken away from other businesses. Had Riverside allowed gambling in 2014, video gambling in 2014, we would not, I can say with 100% certainty, we would not have considered this as our new home community. It does not represent what we and many fellow residents, we believe, are seeking when choosing a safe, small community for our families. And we hope that the village board can agree, as this seems as it will be moving forward. Thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Wolf. Just for clarities, Brian has a wonderful kids menu. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kristen Evans, and I'm on Selborne Road. I'm here today to submit a petition with almost 450 signatures opposing gambling in Riverside. Can you add that to your percentages? I would like to thank everyone in the village who participated in this conversation over the last several weeks by signing the petition, sending emails, engaging social media, and just talking with each other. Community participation is vitally important to a healthy and thriving village, one that suits the needs and desires of everyone living in it. It's unfortunate that after 3 years, tremendous public outcry, both now and in 2015, an EDC decision, 200 gambling signs, 400 plus signatures in opposition, and now we learned that Brian has respected the public's opinion enough to rescind his request, that we're still talking about this. So it's like some of you don't seem to get it. We don't want it. In addition to heeding the wishes of hundreds of residents by saying no to village video gambling, I would like to see this board do a better job of engaging with us and respecting the wishes of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Next, please.
Good evening. I'm Lindsay Morrison. I live at 421 Repton Road. I just wanted to affirm some of the comments that I made directly to the trustees via email. I think it's interesting. I write you all and do it through email and write you all the same thing because I want you to have all the same information. But I'd like to reiterate a few of my points there that I made to the trustees. One, I agree with what's been said about it being against Riverside's brand. There's a lot around that, and I agree with that completely. That's part of the reasons of what Village is and what we want to do with our campaign is why I'm here and have been here since 2013. 2014 maybe? I don't know. I can't do math in public. Economically, I don't think it's going to bring in the dollars that we hope it will, especially because we want to limit the signage and do that. So I'm not sure how people outside of the village would have any knowledge that there were establishments here that do that. So that, and I also don't think that coming in for gambling is, I don't think gambling, an organization with gambling is a destination business that someone would come in for. Coming into empanadas or coming in to get a great burger at Molly's, which I have done, and you've been written up for that. But if we don't advertise, I don't think gambling is, especially when we're completely ringed by gambling. So many people talk about in our campaign about getting off the grid. complain about getting lost in here, so I don't know that they'll come for gambling. I do worry about the statistics and the data that talks about crime and talks about changing property values and bankruptcy, so that is a concern to me. I think that it's interesting the chamber hasn't been here to mention that. I thought that was my thought is it isn't something equitable that's available for all business here to take advantage of. And it's not a way of supporting all the businesses that we can all help and take advantage of. My biggest reason to be against allowing gambling is that I'd like you all to listen to the voters and the many people who have expressed that they are against this. I think that's very important. I'm glad that we're having conversations and doing due diligence. I hope that it can be based upon facts as well. I do have a couple questions. Like Chief Wetzel, do you have data from when you spoke to different villages around us from different police officers? Or were they, well, I don't know, do you have data?
I don't have that data, but at the time I was asked to speak to the chiefs personally and then ask if they had the data and then prepare a memorandum to the manager and board, and that's what I did.
Okay.
So those municipalities do, in fact, keep data.
Because I think that would be a very important piece of data to have and look at for crime if we're doing that. You know, Trustee Lumsden, you have a matrix. That'd be great to see, too, for all of us to see here in public that are involved in this. I think that if there is a reason to go to a ballot referendum, Trustee Ballerine, that'd be something that certainly would involve a larger discussion with the community as well as to what that should be, that type of referendum. I think it's a little bit interesting that you don't all necessarily get the same communications, and that's unfortunate because you don't all have the same information then. Trustee Peters, I really appreciate that you brought up the fact that the burden of proof should be on the one that needs to have a change, wants to make that change happen. I think that's definitely a point, as this has been brought up other times. I think, Trustee Sedevi, the word kowtow is a little offensive and condescending. And I also wanted to point out that you may not have noticed, because we're all kind of speaking as we go, there's a definite conflict between you saying that we're a democratic process, we're a democratic entity, and saying that you don't think and you'd object to there being a referendum. So those seem like conflicting ideas there to me, but maybe that's just something for clarification. In general, I walked a couple blocks and talked to people about this, and it was great, except nobody answers their doors anymore. But the ones that do, I had great conversations with people who agreed with me, who didn't, people who said, thank you, it's great that you're out, I'm glad to have you coming and talking about it. So I think that it has brought a dialogue and has brought a level of engagement that maybe none of us are used to seeing from the community, and so I think we should be appreciative for that. So thank you for the time and the platform, and I am against allowing it, and I'll be closely following the conversation as it continues.
Thank you.
I'm Colleen Arturi, 514 Uvedale, another Uvedale Road person. This is my first trustee meeting, and so just thank you very much for opening this up to discussion. And yeah, am I supposed to state anything else that I'm up here? My address, my name. Anyway, I just like to say, again, thank you for having this discussion. I think it's a fruitful one, and also, like I said, this is my first meeting, so it's gotten me here, so I think that's great that we're having a discussion about this. I first was going to echo some of the sentiments Mrs. Wolf had. I am relatively new to Riverside. I'm not a lifer. I've only lived here about 1.5 years, and so I guess I can speak to having recently looked at the community also in sort of a similar light, that I have this wonderful naivety about the community and, you know, this sort of precious glow that it has, this diamond in the rough quality that drew us here and drew my family here. So as a mother and as a homeowner, I just feel that it is sort of off-brand to have gambling in the community. And as a business owner, I actually own a boutique brand consultancy called The Story Shop. So there's been a lot of talk about branding tonight, and so of course that's been on my mind too in terms of is this congruous with who we are as a community? And I guess I think, it's not, number one, but number two, I see that there's opportunity in this challenge, and that we're having this discussion now leads me to think that, wow, there's something going on in the community. I mean, in the world at large, we know that Amazon is eating the world. I mean, there's a lot of trends that are happening, right? The rise of e-commerce, a lot of that makes it really tough for the small business owner. My clients are primarily small business owners, and so I see that happening every day, and I see that tension. And so it's more important than ever to have a really strong brand and to have a really strong value proposition. And so I guess I'm optimistic about the fact that we're having this discussion now, and this can lead to other discussions for us. I see gambling as that was like a tactic and maybe like a sort of Band-Aid on a situation that's happening. And I'm more than happy to have discussions or form a committee, whatever it takes, work with the Economic Development Commission to create more opportunities for the village and for the business owners, since I'm one too. Thank you, that's all.
The EDC is going to take you up on that.
Hi, I'm Mark Dixon. I live at 275 Lawton Road and appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. In the first place, I'd like to say that I did send a letter to every one of the trustees as well as the president, and I want to appreciate the fact that one of the trustees acknowledged and responded to my email, one. So I'm not quite sure what the ratio is of that, but I believe it's roughly 14% of the trustees. And the reason why I raise that is there's an optics problem here as well. And that can be overcome through discussion. The optics problem is that the EDC voted 4-3. And now we're here and we're discussing this again, and there hasn't been any, as was raised earlier, any proof as to why this is good for the village of Riverside and its residents. So I would like to take a minute and read my letter for the benefit of those that weren't on the copy list. So I'm against commercial gambling in Riverside, full stop. What I don't understand is why we're even talking about it. I imagine this is an attempt by the village to collect more revenue. I assume that's the case. And this is an initiative that's not designed in any way to enhance our historical legacy or our brand, nor is it to provide an unmet demand of convenience in gambling. Just as a point of order here, and in fact, there's no shortage of video gaming in Illinois. In fact, there are more video gaming machines, slots, VGTs I believe they're called, in the state of Illinois than there are in the state of Nevada. So when we talk about branding and identity, let's think about that for a minute. The social and economic costs to the village far outweigh the revenue benefits. But if we're going to do the analysis, then that analysis must include capital flight. It must include the number of residents that are so offended by the notion that there's video gaming and that's causing downward pressure not only on the liquidity of their home, but the value of their home, that they decide to take all of the business somewhere else. One only needs to turn to the Cook County's beverage tax that was farcical in as much as that it was a sugar tax, even on sugar-free drinks. And you let that sink in for a minute, because what happened was what? There was outcry. People were upset. They were upset as much in principle that they could connect the dots as the motivation as they were that someone was actually going to try and grab that extra money, that tax. And what did they do? What was the response? The response was a very emphatic decrease in revenue for all of those businesses, not just those at point of sale in a retail office, but also restaurants and bars. So we have to consider that as well. The village website goes on to talk about our brand, our image. I know that we've made investments in the town in creating something that's an attraction. And frankly speaking, for me, this village has been an attraction. I've owned 2 homes here. I've raised my kids here. I love this community very much and think it has a lot of qualities And I think we're trying to solve a problem here that doesn't really need to be solved at all. And I think we're mixing topics of what we're trying to do and what our motivations are. So let me just say on a personal note that I have no moral issue with gambling. No problem with that whatsoever. I think that if you're going to gamble, you go to a casino. I don't like seeing bars, restaurants that have video, poker, or any other type of gaming there. I just choose not to go to those establishments. That's my free will to do that. What I would say is this: if we're going to talk about a trial period or a test period that's been suggested, then we also do this test period. Let's have everyone in the village of Riverside who's against gaming for that period of time agree to do all of their business, with the exception of water, of course, outside the village. And then we'll do an economic analysis of all the revenue that came in to all the businesses. And we'll see where it lands. And we'll see if it's really going to have the net impact that everyone says that it's going to have, a net positive. I have a few questions if we're going to have a discussion that may carry on in the future that I would like for the trustees and the president to consider. First off, I don't see any advocacy from the Economic Development Council, from the trustees. I haven't heard them say why this is good for the village. Where's the data? Where's the research? Where's the information? Why is it just now something when we've been talking about economic studies in the very recent past? Why is gaming necessary? Why is gaming the most effective solution for the village and its residents? If gaming doesn't produce the expected upside, what are we going to do to unwind it? We should think about that before we start. If it doesn't turn the way we want, how are we going to terminate it so that we don't go through all this mess again? Where's the detailed economic analysis from the businesses that are seeking licenses? I would really enjoy the opportunity to look at those and read those. Personally, the research that I've done, gambling represents an immediate downward pressure on the price of my home and the future liquidity of it. So I want to be selfish for a moment in the same way that these businesses are being selfish. How are these businesses going to make me whole when the property value of my home goes down, when my taxes go up? How are they going to make me whole? I'm selfish, I admit that. But this isn't social welfare, is it? We're not here to support a few businesses. There's a village. I can tell you that the residents of this village, in combination, have made more capital investments, put more of their capital at risk than any of these businesses have. So we have a stake in this too, and it's a big stake. So we ought to be careful and thoughtful about how we talk about these things. And I think we should have discussion points to close the gaps. Last but not least, I would like to say this. You need to consider that consumer effect that I talked about earlier. There will be an impact. There will be some people who will not, in any way, shape, or form, do business here in Riverside. How are we going to compensate for that? Is that a risk that the village is willing to take? I don't mean to suggest that this is a comprehensive list of questions. I merely mean that if we're going to do this, and we're going to do this in a fair and open, transparent way, then we do it like we would do with any business. Where are we going to place our investments? What's the downside risk? What's the upside reward? Does it make sense? Not just in the short term, but in the long term. So when our kids grow up and they decide to stay here, they stay here because they want to be here. And they stay here because the quality of life is as good as it can get anywhere else. Thank you for your time this evening.
Mr. Dixon. Next, please.
Good evening, trustees. My name is Neil Coombs. I moved to 277 Gatesby about 5 years ago, and I'm opposed to video gambling in Riverside. Would not have moved here if I had thought video gambling was a serious possibility anytime during the time I would live here. I've worked in the financial industry for 15 years, and I believe that introducing video gambling to Riverside would amount to fiduciary irresponsibility. The revenue from video gambling to Riverside wouldn't even cover the salary of the police officer that would need to be hired to compensate for the 10 to 15% increase in crime that has been shown to follow. I appreciate Chief Weitzel reaching out to surrounding communities to ask about that, but I hope we won't value anecdotal evidence over rigorous analysis. And those costs don't even take into account the property value loss that was just brought up. I would anticipate about a 10% loss, but even if I'm obscenely conservative and claim that there was only a 1% property value loss as a result, that would still represent over $10 million in property value lost in Riverside, which wouldn't even be covered by revenue from gambling in 100 years. For those reasons, I'm opposed, and I thank you for your time.
While we have just a quick pause here, one clarification, I'm not making an argument here, but so everyone knows, this is the first time this board has spoken on this topic. First time. So you've been here for the sum total of all conversation at this board level there's been on gambling. So just please understand that framework. It was a different board. No, it's a different there's three new board members.
Does that mean we have to revisit it every 2 years? I hope not. Let's hope not. Please don't.
Good evening. My name is David Flassing. My wife and I have lived in Riverside for 15 years, the last 10 or so, at 327 Maplewood Road. We have 2 children who are 9 and 11. I am opposed to gambling in Riverside. I'm opposed to gambling as a commercial activity here. I'm not opposed to it as a moral issue. I certainly don't mind a game of poker every now and again, but as I am not opposed to what people do, consenting adults, I don't want to see that sort of behavior or activity commercialized in this town. I don't want video gambling here for the same reason I wouldn't want a pawn shop or a massage parlor or a methadone clinic. That doesn't mean that I think that the business should be demonized for bringing this to the attention of the public and trying to get a change to business. It's a for-profit entity. That's what businesses do, and we should support our local businesses in every way, just not this one. One of the trustees, I think, brought up earlier that certain communities around us have gambling and certain don't. I think if you want to see who we'd like to have as our peer group on this, LaGrange, Hinsdale, Western Springs, they have the wisdom to see that video gambling is not a good idea. It's not what we want. It's not why we bought our houses. Most of the people here who have purchased homes in Riverside understand the economics that there might be a few more dollars of tax revenue from a one-armed bandit, but it is not worth the decrease in our property values. It's not worth the decrease in the safety of our families. So I ask that you continue to vote against this proposition.
Hello, I'm Richard Folks. I live at 168 Addison Road. Appreciate this opportunity to talk to the board and to my fellow townsmen. I am a physician. I've lived here again since '95. I guess we moved to town. I raised 2 children here. This is an incredibly unique village. I mean, there's no question. This is a really unique place. We are not like any place I know in this entire area. And I would almost go as far as saying it's unique in the United States. We're a little island, an oasis, a beautiful oasis that has been almost a secret that we keep. Sadly for the businesses here, people don't like to come into this town because they get lost on Olmsted's circular causeways, and for this reason, the commercial district has suffered in this town nearly the entire time I've been here. We've seen businesses come and go. We've had really one solid restaurant that's been able to make it consistently. And so in the past 2 to 3 years, we've really seen something start to happen in this village, which I find really exciting. And of course, we can be very thankful that the Leones stepped up and got Labara to move into town. It's clearly helped in terms of just bringing outsiders into this town that didn't even realize what an amazing place this was to come visit. I think I know lots of people that have come here for the very first time because of Labara. I have my practice out in Lombard where the original Labara exists, and I've had patients out there tell me that, oh yeah, we went to that other Labara in Riverside. Wow, what a great place, what an amazing city. And again, I don't think we've meant to keep it a secret, but there just wasn't that thing to draw people into this town. So the question is really tonight, obviously, it isn't, whether or not, to me, this is not really about how we economically push the city. To me, it's really what risk are we placing this place to have video gaming. So let me just back up and say, as a physician, I think like a physician. And video gaming is a brilliantly designed system to allow the current machines allow the gamer to win very small chunks of money over and over and over again. And it is an addiction. It is an addiction. The people who become addicted to these machines find themselves in this zone, and they can't stop. They can't stop this behavior. It's a small number of people that become bankrupt. It's a significant number of people that become bankrupt. And these folks are not happy people. They're certainly not a warm, fuzzy person to have in your environment. We hide them back in the back room. To me, it's almost more disgraceful that we know that this is such an ugly situation, that we're hiding this act in the back of one of our facilities, one of our restaurants here. I mean, it just doesn't seem to make this come clean. We know that this is a way that we can raise revenue, but is this really how we want to raise revenue in this town? Is this really the idea that we have to make the city somehow have a bit more tax revenue? To me, if you want to do this behavior, certainly there are lots of communities around here to do this behavior, but to me, in this town, I love coming to Molly's. I've been coming to Molly's before it was Molly's. It's that I have raised my children around that environment. It's a beautiful, unique piece of architecture in this town, and I love the place. And the truth is that we want your business to succeed. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. And I really believe, and I think most of us would agree, that the Kenny construction has been a horrible thing for you. It completely, blotted that zone just as this brand new, spanking, glaring restaurant opens kitty corner from you. And I think that, the city we can't compensate a business that gets hurt this way. We have to recognize that this Kenny construction has been a significant harm to a business we really would like to see stay in the city. And I don't believe that if you had the choice, this wouldn't be your fix. I believe that to be the case. If your business was thriving right now, if this Kenny thing wasn't happening to you the way it did, I'm not sure you'd be, saying, well, what more can I do to make this business work? I don't know that to be the case, but I'm guessing that if that were true, if you were really thriving there, the way you should be, by the way, that you would be here, that we have this discussion tonight. So I would just like to, I'm maybe rambling, but let me just sum up by saying that, I personally, I drive a Prius, and I'm a physician. I could probably have any kind of car I want. I choose to do these things because I want to represent for someone that cares about the environment, cares about, these kind of issues that could possibly, mean something to the future of our planet. And to me, we represent as a village. We represent as a village. And to me, I think the fact that we are saying no to this particular behavior speaks to something deeper than just this idea that maybe there'd be some small tick in crime. Crime correlations are very hard to make. And I personally, I'm not here to object to the possibility that maybe some person comes into town that could bring some criminal. We have criminal element in this town. We know we do. There's gangs that have that operate out of this town. There's criminal element. This will not be the incendiary moment for crime in a city. But what it does do is it brings an element into the city that is a desperate person, someone who is addicted to a behavior that is really not helping their lives. It's destroying their lives. And for that bit of revenue, we shamefully put this in the back room. I mean, this to me it's inexcusable. We are better than that as a village. And I think there's a lot more we can do to build this village and build what this village really is about, which is this amazing destination. My God, we have hundreds of thousands of people coming to this zoo over here. Why don't they participate in this village? Why aren't we doing more to draw those people into this village? What more could we be doing for that? This should be somewhere you get off why would they get off the train at this remote location across here in Brookfield when they could get off the train here? We could provide a bus service, for instance, for folks to make it over, and they would stop here, and then when they came back, they'd see Molly's. They'd say, oh, wow, there's a great Irish pub. I can sit outdoors. I can bring my dog in my own case, which is great. And so suffice it to say, I recognize why this meeting is happening. And I totally want your business to succeed. I really do. And I think the village owes it to this man to see that we do what we can to get this village back, to keep Molly's in this town. It's a great resource, great food. You're a restaurateur, you have a wonderful gift at making a vegetarian like me a mushroom hamburger, And again, but this, I don't believe you would even be here tonight if your business was thriving. And I really think that you've been hurt by this Kenny's project. When does the Kenny's project end?
It's basically over on Forest.
When?
It's basically over now. They had to come back in because they had water was leaking through the polymer, so they're finishing that and then they'll be gone.
Well, again, I vote for this village doing what it can to really support its local businesses. And I hope you all will forgive this fellow and frequent his business. I think we should have a party at I think we should pack his house for the next few weeks. Seriously, I mean this. If you really care about this topic, go have a great brew and some of his great food. To me, that is the resolution. It's not that we have to fight each other and hate each other and have this kind of ridiculous behavior that we've heard. It's because we're way better than that as a community. And I think what I'm up here to speak to is just that. Let's be better than this. We don't need this. We really don't. And we don't.
My name is Christine Herbst. I'm chairman of the Economic Development Commission, and I know the EDC is how we shorten our commission's name, has been mentioned several times. And if you were at our September 14th meeting, you know that we voted to not continue moving video gaming forward. So I think that's been mentioned several times. So I was going to read my comments from that meeting in case you didn't watch it on Riverside TV. But I thought a lot of the things that I had commented on that evening have already been said tonight, and much more eloquently than I said them. So I thank you for all your comments. All of them have been quite succinct. But to the good doctor's point, made me think of a point that I wanted to bring up tonight. Was several years ago, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency Planning, we call it CMAP because we have to have an acronym for everything. So if you hear CMAP, that's what that organization is. We had the wonderful firepower of those urban planners work with us. And they produced, when I say us, I mean us. We had public meetings, we had trustee meetings, we had commission meetings. Everybody, we always have open call, like these meetings, people showed up to talk and whatever. They produced a beautiful report for us. Well, in this beautiful report were all these recommendations. And any one of the recommendations could be like a huge project, So, one of the but what it gave us was a blueprint or a guiding light or something. So that, and many of the commissions have been working on those because everyone kind of had their own, CMAP targeted certain commissions that they thought made sense to tackle certain things or whatever. So, the recommendation that fell into the logical kind of map or place for us was some of the points that you were talking about, come up with a marketing plan, a branding, signage, connection, and after those things, you come up with those documents, then you can move on. Because I've been on the Economic Development Commission for a few years, and I think it's natural for people to kind of get tactical. You know, we're like, oh my gosh, I have to do something. So we all run off in our directions. And we stepped back and said, you know, we sat with CMAP for, you know, all this time, and we've got this thing. Let's step back and do the foundation work. But that's hard. That's hard, takes a lot of time. And that's what branding is about. That's what a marketing plan is about. You know, branding is really your identity. And I know a lot of you we all have feelings about it, but you need to put it to paper. You need to put it to imagery. You need to do those reporting so that everybody communicates in a similar fashion. You saw last year that one of our, and being mindful of the budgetary pressures, we've been phasing things in over years because we can't pay for everything all at once. So last year, you know, we worked on the logo, and we worked on what we call a style guide, because if you have any vendor working for you, it's like their blueprint on how they represent your imagery. We're a small town. We don't have a huge marketing department, you know, so we've got to get a lot of these marketing assets that we can entrust to other people as well. So this year, you've probably, you know, heard in the last couple meetings of the EDC, and we presented it at the village meeting in October, what we had our branding concept, you know, and that's how you articulate some of your long-term competitive advantages. So we are working on these things because we're trying to lay the groundwork for the long haul. You know, we really, to benefit all of us, businesses, visitors, because you probably have a lot of stories of all of the landscape, I call them architecture pilgrims that come to town, you know, because they know of Riverside because of, you know, their background. Well, we want to play to those visitors. We want to make sure that we do the homework to make our home ready for them. But a lot of that isn't in place right now, and we realize that. A lot of this work is done by volunteers, too, so that kind of slows us down, too. Like I mentioned before, we don't have a huge marketing department or communications department. So we are working on things. We're always, even though commissioners are tasked with things, you as residents can show up. We always say public is welcome. You're also invited to volunteer on commissions. You know, even though there's 7 commissioners, not all the work is, you know, you can volunteer for any of these works, you know, in the commissions. So if you ever have any questions about what we're doing, you know, just email me or any of the trustees or come to our meetings. So hopefully that helped, and I just didn't ramble on too much. Thank you.
Just while we're waiting for the next person, I'm glad Christine's here. I mean, the Economic Development Commission over the last several years the prior chair is up here, now a trustee, and they've done an amazing amount of work and have produced some of the best work product I've ever seen. And we are just at the implementation stage where we're going to start doing a lot of the things we've been hearing about tonight in terms of outreach to the city and the zoo and places like that. So that's where we are. We're ready to move forward into that next step, and they have done an extraordinary job. So thank you to the EDC. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Jim Adelsek. I live in 256 Gage Road. We've been here 15 years. I have 2 daughters that were both raised here, born in town, now at RB and Hauser. We love the village. Kudos to the new branding statement. I think it certainly encapsulates the idyllic vision that my wife and I have of the town and the reasons that we moved here and that we love the village. I'm a closet introvert. I was hoping not to speak today, but I just wanted to come up and make a plea for a little more civility in some of the debate and commentary, both online and in person. I was against gambling in 2015. I attended the village board meeting at that time. I think my opinion on the subject has softened somewhat, but I'm still against it. But just overhearing some of the comments made recently against Brian and Molly's, people wanting to boycott it in advance just because the venue, the establishment is considering gambling, I find perplexing. And those are some of the nicer comments I've heard. I know Eric was a little extreme in some of his points, but I would just ask that we try to be civil in the debate and commentary moving forward. Thank you.
So, next, okay. No. You don't have to be that civil. Somebody come up here.
Hi, trustees. I'm back. I'm Kimber Coombs. I'm at 277 Gatesby. So I've sent an email, which you may have gotten. I sent it Monday morning. And so I'm just going to read some of the things that I omitted from the email and trying to be more clear and concise in the written word. One of the things that I have is, I don't know any of you personally, but I'd like to think that you all have the best intentions and strive towards excellence to serve our community. I empathize that public service is often a thankless job and you can't please everyone all the time. I get that. This conversation has been going on since July and a lot of great information has come out of the conversation, some of which I provided in links in my email, so you have that information. I also provided links to the police reports in Forest Park because there have indeed been video gaming specific burglaries going on in Forest Park this year. Ben, to your point about regulation, I'm just not sure you can regulate this. You know, you had the thing where we raise our hands, and that was kind of a cool experiment, so thank you for that. But, you know, I happened to drive down 47th a lot, going from here to Lyons. And, you know, it's not uncommon that I see a big white cargo van plastered in video gaming advertisements, you know. So, you know, I don't know how we regulate the company car, because that's a valid thing. I mean, someone could have a company vehicle and plaster it with their advertisements, which is fair, right? I just don't think we're ever going to regulate it to the nth degree that maybe there's a vision of doing. Trustee Lumsden, I super appreciate that you have your laptop tonight. I'm a total data geek. I research things crazy. And I think, I hope, if you look at all the data, like all of the data, because there is a lot of it out there, that you'll be hard-pressed to support video gambling in Riverside. I totally get your comment about those 20 or so people who would like to gamble in Riverside. It's important to listen to and represent your constituents. However, maybe with the 450 or so residents indicating by petition and the 64 or more emails, maybe the constituents have kind of spoken proactively before your vote, you know, whatever that vote may be. And I'm sure they would speak again to Trustee Ballerine's point at referendum or election, you know, whatever the democratic process ends up being. Net-net, video gambling is a zero-sum proposition where one or two businesses win, but the residents and businesses who can't or won't have VGTs lose. One of the things I found in my research is that I think it's in Brookfield, and I don't remember the numbers, but only 50% of eligible businesses in Brookfield have video gaming. That means 50% of the businesses that are allowed to have video gaming in Brookfield, they don't. They choose not to. So they are competing successfully without it. Same goes for, the statistics are a little bit different, but in every community that I looked at, there were businesses that were able to have it that chose not to for whatever reason. And the other interesting thing in the data that I looked at was that there were businesses that closed. So it wasn't, you know, this magic sort of thing that they were suffering, they brought it in, and, oh, we're swimming in money. You know, it just doesn't really happen that way, I guess. Whether you believe the exact statistics or not, because there are a lot of statistics, there is enough consistent, reputable data to indicate that implementing video gambling will have some sort of a negative impact on our community. It's kind of intangible. We don't know what that impact will be until after the fact, but enough study has been done, academic study, consistent results, that I think it's a pretty good, look into the crystal ball to see what would happen. Most likely, we're going to have an increase in crime and depreciating property values. You know, that seems to be the most consistent thing. If any of our trustees or anyone in our community, because we have had a lot of good discussion, if anyone is, truly in favor of bringing the video gambling, I'd love to see that data, and I'd love to see those statistics showing how it will positively impact Riverside and add value to the families who live here. And if we can't have that data, we can't find it, people can't provide it, then maybe we need to reconsider those positions. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you so much for your time, guys.
It is a long walk from the other side of the room. I'm Aberdeen Marsh Osga. I live at 150 Nuttall Road. I, too, like some of the others, sent an email to the board, but I am not sure you all received it, so here we are. I'm a member of the Riverside Preservation Commission and the boards of the Frederick Law Olmsted Society and Visit Oak Park, which is the area convention and visitors bureau that represents our surrounding communities, including Riverside. Though I am here tonight as an individual, I have to say that my experience with these groups has impressed upon me the value of Riverside's landmark status and the importance of Riverside's ideals in the context of our nation's heritage. And that is a point that really hasn't been discussed tonight. I'm here to ask you not to compromise these ideals by allowing the gaming industry an entree into Riverside. The potential benefit to one class of business is not worth tarnishing the image. I know that each of you do take your responsibilities seriously, and whether the effects of gambling are of concern to you or not, please keep in mind that you do not owe a greater duty to liquor licensees desiring to make money off of gamblers than you do to the other businesses in town or to the residents. With all due respect, being the first National Historic Landmark to allow video gambling is not something to be proud of. And if it is something that we're talking about hiding or not something that we would want in our new brochure, it's not the right direction for Riverside. Riverside is exceptional. Thank you.
So the night is starting to get a little long. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board before we give the trustees another chance to talk? Did you have something else, Mary?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that study did mention the revenue breakdown.
You need to say this up here so people can hear. I'm sorry.
We're talking about money, is it worth it? The study did mention that the breakdown was 70% of the revenue went to the owners and the enterprise, 25% went to the state, and 5% went to the municipality, just to sort of give you an idea. So the village really wouldn't receive any kind of serious benefit. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. So I guess my question is, after that extraordinary input,
Does anybody have a change of heart? Where are we? What would we like to do moving forward? Would anybody else like to talk? I have some responses to some of the things we heard, but I'd like to hear from you guys first. Anybody have anything to say?
I'd like to go to Molly's.
There's a motion to go to Molly's as soon as this meeting is over.
I can start, because first and foremost, again, I want to thank everybody that came here, that talked here, to provide that, because that's the kind of input we need. My favorite comment of the night was the one regarding civility and comments. I don't know who plead for that, but that's really important to me. And I think that's to me, that still is what makes Riverside the jewel in the rough and a little bit off the grid, is that we can talk about our differences and we can figure this out. We now have difference in statistics with the petition, and I think that's important. So whoever put that together, that's very important that we do that. I challenge the folks that were for this to do the same if they can do that. I don't know whether they can or they can't, but if they can, that will give us the information that we need to make a good decision on all of our behalves. So I want to just say thanks for everybody having the courage to come up, all the emails. If anybody watching or listening, if they can, wants to send more for or against, I think that's really important for us to have that baseline to know whether or not it's worth a referendum or whether or not there's an overwhelming response. We just need to figure that out. And again, I think as far as the revenue piece, I heard a few people talk about the revenue. I don't see this as a big gain from a revenue perspective. It might help us buy an ambulance or something like that, but I certainly don't want us to make the decision based upon a revenue perspective. At least from my perspective, it has to do with the fact that some of our neighbors have asked for us to consider this. And that's why we need to go through the process. And if it passes or doesn't pass, I think that's for the next discussion.
I think I'd echo those sentiments as well. And this is painful. It's not fun, that's for sure. But if we're putting a focus on economic development as a necessary focus, I think that's important. And hopefully, if this doesn't work, something will. Hopefully it generates ideas. Hopefully people stay involved. All too often, you get an uproar and then people step aside, but sometimes a couple people stay with it, and that's what we really need. I mean, the town still needs help. There's still a lot of vacant storefronts. It's still not anything to be completely proud of from a commercial perspective, so we need to stay at it.
Anybody else? So just and I'm going to kind of jump around here a bit because there were some questions that came up along the way. One of which was about how this came up and why we're talking about it. We're talking about it because we were asked to talk about it. The same reason we talked about bees or chickens or vacation rentals or any of the other things we talked about, we were asked to talk about it, and that's why we're talking about it. It was never put forward, and I think Mr. Dixon asked about this, it was never put forward as a revenue stream for the village. In fact, this bears to me striking similarities to years ago when we talked about red light cameras. We heard a lot of exactly the same arguments from the industry. It's legal, everybody's doing it, you make lots of easy money, it's a no-brainer, you just set them up and you rake it in. But the board at that time said, we are not going to legislate for profit. We are not going to base legislative decisions on the fact that the village might be able to bring in a few bucks, which I thought was a very noble stance to take. So as far as I'm concerned, that aspect is off the table. The other question that often comes up is this, and this is foisted mainly, in my view, by the gambling industry, is that somehow this is good for business. And I think Aberdeen really touched on this as well. You say it's good for business, but which ones? The fact is that what happens in villages that allow gambling like this, a business that is subsidized by gambling can undercut the pricing of those who choose not to have gambling. So early on, we were presented with an argument back in 2015 that the reason we needed video gambling was to level the playing field. But what we've learned since then is that within communities that have it, the video gambling is what creates an unlevel playing field. In fact, there's one of the findings in the information that Director App gave us. It was a panel discussion that the Illinois Municipal League did. And one of their key findings, and I'll just read it verbatim, this is remarkable. The presence or absence of gaming units did not significantly impact the total overall taxes generated by restaurants, which suggests to me that whatever money a restaurant makes from gambling, they lose in terms of food and beverage sales and alienated customers. So it seems to be, from this study at least, a wash. Another thing that I think, and this is another point that made, that it takes money out of the economy. You know, I think Nick made the point about, you know, what net waging losses. You know, the 70% that goes to the operator, to the established, the 25% that goes to the state is gone. That is money taken out of our local economy. So I think it's a spurious claim by the gambling industry to claim that video gambling is somehow good for business. And also the point that Kim made, that in communities that have gambling, a large majority, well, I shouldn't say a large majority, a large number of those businesses choose not to have it and are successful despite being undercut by the businesses that are subsidized by the gaming. Ms. Wolf made a lot of really beautiful points. In this stack of emails I have, there are several families that specifically told us that if we had had gambling in Riverside, they would have gone elsewhere. Now, if we have any doubt that video gambling is going to tarnish and hurt our branding and marketing efforts, that should answer it. That is data. That is proof from people who have told us they would not be here if we had had it. Lastly, and I think I was going to say this earlier, and I don't know if I got interrupted or just got off point, with regard to the referendum question. It's interesting to note that when the gaming statute was, and I don't know if I said this already, stop me. I think I started and then didn't get to it. When the gambling statute was first passed, it was intended to be an opt-out statute. The idea was that everybody throughout Illinois was going to have gambling, and if you wanted to opt out, you'd have to opt out. Governor Quinn vetoed that aspect of the statute and insisted that it be an opt-in process, because the whole intent of the video gambling statute is that people should, through popular action, should opt in to video gambling for their village. So the idea of a referendum is especially appropriate given that history. So it sounds like we're still where we were before the comment. So what will happen now is at the next meeting we will come back and pick this up when we have enough people there to cast a formal vote, and we'll see where things land. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment before we close up? We have no new business, and no need for an executive session. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you, everyone, for calling and writing and stopping me in Riverside Foods. I love it when you do that, so keep doing it. And with that, I'd ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lumsden.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Setterby. Aye. Trustee Peters. Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good night.